Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Brilliant Women's Collective of You Forgot to Teach Me How to Be a Girl, a conversation series on femininity and the church, So I'm so excited to have you here. I'm so excited about the conversation we're going to have on this evening. We have a brilliant woman who is going to share her experience, her come to knows with us in just a few minutes. I just want to go over some ground rules. Just be respectful of each other's awareness. Just because a person doesn't think like you or approaches spirituality different than you were taught does not mean that their way isn't valid, that their way isn't ordained and trusted by God. So just keep in mind the EFGs, elegance, femininity, and grace. If you lead in the comment section with the EFGs in mind, everything will go perfectly well. Also, the hashtag for this event is hashtag how to be a girl or simply be a girl. And of course, you can tag us here at ItsMeYCB or Brilliant Women's Collective or our speaker who is coming on in a few seconds. And the fragrance for today, because here at Brilliant Women, we love to evoke the presence of God with feminine fragrances. We simply have beautiful lavender that is filling the room. And so we hope, God, that this fragrance brings a sweet aroma to your nostrils. With that being said, let's bring on our guests. Whenever Steve Jobs says she can join. Thank you, dear. Hello.
I'm
good. How are you? I'm so excited to have you. I must say that I was introduced to you via TikTok. You were just telling your story, and I sat up. I was in the bed, so it must have been late when it came on my For You page. And I sat up and I was like, I've got to reach out to this woman because this is my kind of conversation. And here we are. Here we are talking about femininity and the church, a little about what you were speaking of to your followers on TikTok. So I just want you to introduce yourself, and then we're going to jump right in.
My name is Tamika Christy, and I am a writer. I'm an author. I'm a mom, and I'm a Christian. And I recorded that post in the middle of the night because I was thinking about some of the things that I learned growing up in the church and how it didn't always equate with what was happening in real life. So that's what the post was about. That's who I am. And I guess we can get started.
Absolutely. So I like to start this series off to take us back to go forward. So we're going to go back to young Tamika Christy before the book was conceptualized. Where did you grow up? What was the name of your church? And what did you want to be when you grew up?
I grew up in Oakland, California, here in the Bay Area. The name of my church was Sunlight Church of God in Christ. And I attended church from the time I was 4, all the way until I became an adult old enough to say that I didn't want to attend church anymore. What was the third question? I'm sorry, I forgot. A teacher.
What did you
I
want
wanted
to
teach writing. I always loved reading and writing, and I wanted to be a teacher when I grew up.
Someone gave you a shout out to Kojic, if that means anything in your ethos.
I know we're all out here. I got so many comments on that post because people understood where I was coming from. It's a really, really tough journey when you are trying to rationalize things that you were taught as a young person. And when you grow up and realize that some of those things, it's not fair, it's judgmental, and it's not really real. Yeah. So I got a lot of people who were feeling me on that post. So shout out to the project.
Rightly so. Yeah, rightly so, because that's the big aha of all of this. The rules, I call it, is that none of it was real. I mean, they probably had good intentions. I would say. I don't think they were being malicious behind it, but the rationale behind it, just 1 + 1 wasn't 2. It was something else that was probably passed down generational, that by the time it crept up into our generation, it was like, well, wait a minute, something doesn't feel right, you know? So we're going to talk a little bit about your church life. Tell me about growing up Kojak. So you went to church what days of the week, and were you participating in events or auxiliaries and things like that? Tell me about church.
Tuesday was Bible band. Wednesday was purity class, and you start that at 13. Thursday was choir rehearsal, and Friday we had Friday night service. Saturday, we usually had some sort of a barbecue where we sold plates, or fish fry and sold plates. And Sunday was church, and it was one of those old school churches where service starts at 10. People trickle in at 11 or 12. We had testimony service where everybody stood up and testified. They took offering. They counted the offering in front of everybody. If they wanted to reach a goal, they asked people for more money. And we would be in church from 10 to 4 o'clock. And we would leave church, and we'd all go as a group to get dinner. And we'd come back to church supposedly for 6, but sometimes it would start at 7. And I lived that way all of my childhood.
Wow. Did you ever have a choice? Or this is just...
There was no church.
Okay.
Most of us that grew up in homes where our parents are really into church, there's no choice about going to church. You were going to go to church. We went to church on Sundays. We went to church on New Year's Eve. We went to church all the time, and there was no choice.
Okay. So the church has rules, right? The church has its doctrines of how the Christian lifestyle should be. How much of those rules that were in the constructs of the church actually trickled into your home?
You know what? When I was growing up, almost all of it. The one thing I can say about my dad is he was one of those people that when I was growing up, he really did walk the walk. There was no secular music in my house. I went to bed at 8 o'clock until I was in middle school. And I remember this so well because I used to watch The Cosby Show. And after The Cosby Show, A Different World would come on. And I remember never seeing any of the seasons of A Different World because I was in bed. My stepmom didn't wear makeup. She didn't wear pants. We very much lived what they were teaching us in church. And that's why a lot of, I don't get angry with my dad for the way he raised me because I feel like there was this impossible standard that we were living by, but he himself was also trying to live it. And I feel like he was giving me the best that he had and the best that he knew. And he even himself didn't realize that it was almost impossible until much later. But movies, songs, there are some old school songs now that I still don't know just because we didn't listen to it. Yeah.
I tell people I don't know New Edition songs. I know that they sang like Candy Girl, I believe, but I didn't go to their concerts and things like what is his name? The
Al Green.
Al Green wasn't playing.
Andre Crouch is another singer.
I just heard those songs. Oh yeah, Andre Crouch is the gospel singer. That's who was playing instead of Al Green. So then you are going to school. And because you couldn't wear pants.
I could wear pants. So the kids, we could wear pants. It was the adult women.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So was there an awareness like, gosh, when I grow up, I'm going to have to dress like them. I'm going to have to be like what look like old people as a teenager. I'm going to have to look like that. So maybe I don't want to be safe. Did you ever feel that?
Well, it was different. So the young people, we always said that when we grew up, we were going to go out into the world because that's what they would always talk about. When I was out in the world back in the day. So we always said, like, when we grow up, we're going to be out in the world and we're going to have our fun and then we're going to come back and be safe. So that was always the plan, which when you think about it, it makes no sense. Like your life, if you can serve God and be happy and be a Christian at the same time, you don't have to choose one or the other. But at the time, we felt like we had to choose.
Right. So you and your peers at school look the same. You didn't have that type of pressure where, Dad, how come I can't get my ears pierced, or how come I can't wear? Could you wear makeup in high school?
I could, but I didn't. But I could have, but I didn't. Yeah.
Okay. So you went to prom.
I did wear makeup for prom.
Okay, so you could go to prom. You just couldn't listen to the music in the home.
I would listen to it in my room.
And okay, out loud,
my
or
little
like
Walkman.
Low vibes.
I had a Walkman.
Yeah, I remember one time I recorded. I don't know your age, but it's an older song. It's I Wanna Sex You Up. The song I Wanna Sex You Up. I recorded it, and my dad found the tape and just played it out loud for the house. It was just a song that was in style. Then I don't know what, I didn't want to do that. It was just the song that was in style. But that's so interesting that you guys kind of had a pact, the young people at this church, we have this pact that when we grow up, we're going to just deviate from what should be drawing you to the love of Christ. But in fact, you guys, I'm thinking, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, you saw it as more so the rules of Christ. Like, to be saved, you have to do this. So before we do that, we know we want to be saved because they done scared us into believing that if you don't get saved, you're going to the devil, right? So you don't want that. Yes. Yet that will be your eternal home. So we're going to do just enough to say we were in the world, because the world seemed enticing and fun based off of just what we knew. The saints were testifying that it was rough, but my pastor, my teenage pastor, used to tell us that sin is fun. You have fun in the world. So I had a different look at it. Like, I just ready to have fun more so than like it's horrible out here, as maybe my adolescent years when I was a preteen. That church made it seem like, oh my gosh, if you get out there, you're gonna die immediately without Christ in your life. So I think it's interesting that you guys had this pact that, okay, we're going to do this. So did you do that? And what did you learn?
I did. When I turned 18, I stopped going to church because I didn't have to. And one thing, I went on a 10-year journey of trying to discover myself and figure myself out, because there were things that just didn't make sense to me. There was just a lot of judgment about makeup and the way people dressed, people drinking wine. There was all these external things that we were being judged on. I felt like the Christian church would judge people on, but there were some internal things that didn't make sense to me. So, for example, you're in church and you hear people saying, you drink wine or you do this, but then there's the forgiveness factor. There's the kindness factor. There's people in the church who are sour-faced. And I'm just like, this doesn't make sense. So you can't drink wine, but you can be crappy to people. So I went on a 10-year journey of trying to figure out who I was and what my relationship with Christ was. And ironically, I found it in a non-denominational church. It was actually a white pastor. And I asked him about drinking and smoking. And he looked at me and he said, Tamika, there are a lot of things in the Bible that standards that it is almost impossible for us to adhere to without the ones that we put in them. And that's when I started to realize, okay, some of this is not all biblical, because when you're growing up, I wasn't really reading the Bible. I was just doing what I was told. And I thought all these things that I was taught, I thought that they were against the Bible. And I learned later on that they were not. They were man-made. And that made me a little bit bitter. And I just went on my own discovery and my own journey of having my relationship with God and learning what was right and what was wrong for myself. And it made me feel like I wasted a lot of time, a lot of judgment on people that I had absolutely no space or room to do. And it was eye-opening, but it was also a little bit disappointing that I grew up that way, because I was like, you cannot drink and go to heaven. Like, I was adamant. You cannot curse. I was adamant about those things because that's what I was taught. But all the while, nobody was pouring into me about being genuine and loving and kind and forgiving and all these things that we really should have been striving to be. We're just focused on these external things that are happening in the world that have nothing to do with our relationship with God and us being better people.
Wow, that is so beautiful how you just stated all of that. And so, if they're not teaching you about love and the grace of God, because it's almost like at times growing up in a household that had strict Pentecostal rules as our house rules. My church wasn't. My church was like your non-denominational. I say all the time, if you can't be saved at that church, you just can't be saved, because you can do whatever and God loves you still. But my mom implemented the way she was taught into the household. So mine was much stricter than yours. Like, I remember looking at the older people like, I don't want to wear girdles like them. I don't want to wear slips under my dresses. I just want to show my panties a little bit. I don't want to do this. So I'm going to be 90 when I get saved. I had just kind of made that decision because I felt like at 90, you've done it all or whatever. And also, I feel like grace wouldn't let me believe what they were saying was true. So I never got into the like debates about, oh, you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't wear pants. And I never got into those because it never felt like real to me. It just felt like I was being made to do this because grandma said we had to live like this. If grace isn't taught, love wasn't taught, then what was taught about femininity at this Wednesday night purity service? I'm kind of interested in that.
Cleanliness, honoring your body, honoring yourself, respecting yourself, um, and commanding a respect from boys. This is purity is 13 through, I don't know what we were, 16. So I always grew up, I curse, not a whole lot, but it always felt like it was a wrong thing to do. And my dad used to say, people who curse don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to express themselves. So there was a lot of being respectful. And I will tell you now, I still wear slips. I do.
You
I
do?
can't not. And people tease me. One day I was out with some friends and my skirt, I don't know what happened with my skirt. And one of my friends said, "Are you wearing a slip?" I wear slips. I wear slips. Now I did draw the line. I don't really wear stockings. I will. But I don't really wear stockings anymore. But I do still wear slips. I still am pretty conservative in the way that I dress and present myself. I'll get a little bit, sexy, but and that's the thing. Some of that stuff is so deep in you. It's hard to get it out. It's very hard. I don't know if I've ever worn pants to church. That's another thing. It's just some of those things they teach us about. It's this whole level of like respecting yourself and being godly and being this virtuous woman. And I mean, it's just a really, really hard standard. And I even now, I still feel like there's some things as a woman that I should not do or say or present myself. And only recently did I start using songs on my TikToks that have like cursing in them. And not that I don't listen to songs that have cursing in them, but it just felt like that wasn't a good way to present myself. So it's still like unlearning and undoing, even at this age of 49, you asked earlier, of trying to figure out what things make sense and what things don't make sense. And there are some things that have just become a part of you. And as a woman, I just feel like there's some things that I should not do and I will not do. Like you will never catch me somewhere outside saying like the F word, or you just won't. And it's perfectly fine for people too. But when you have been given that, it's hard to break away from some of that.
Right. I can agree with you because I don't wear pants to church either. Well, I don't go into a physical building either. But if I was to go into a physical building, I'm always looking for the dress or the skirt because that's just kind of like my mom would just have a fit if I walked up in her church and there I am with my legs in pants. Like she wear pants to church. But I don't see anything wrong with it. I'm not frowning laughing at the first lady because she have them on, but I always look at it like, what would Jackie O do? What would she wear in this moment? And so that's what I lean into more so than the rules itself. But you're right, these rules are ingrained, and you're constantly having to work at it and undo and undo and undo in order to really tap into who you really are. Before there was rules that were established for you. Did you see women in your church living in that Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama type roles, strong women that are free to do and be, and it's okay?
Absolutely not. The women in my church served, they cooked. The men were usually separate, and they were respected, as wives and moms. But they really adhered to a more compliant, submissive way of living, and that is what I was taught also. And bear in mind, I was raised by my father. He was a single parent. He did get married later on, but he was my primary parent, and so he taught me that as well.
Wow. Same, like the women I saw, and we talked about this last week with Dr. Deirdre, our speaker, where women in the church have very domesticated roles, right? So hospitality, that's your girl. Cooking in the kitchen, that's your girls. But when it comes to leading that service, as far as like delivering a homily or a sermon, it's never ever gonna be the woman, especially for churches that don't believe women should preach. How do you feel about women being in authoritative roles like a Kamala Harris? Is there something in you still that wants your pastor to be a man?
Years ago, probably yes. But I'm learning a lot of things. And I will be honest, I did believe for a long time that men had to lead, and I do not believe that now. I actually attend church where the pastor is a woman. She's a dynamic, incredible, amazing woman. But that is something that I believed for a long time. And when women would come to our church, guest speakers to speak, I always thought either that's inappropriate for her to speak or inappropriate for her, certain things that they would wear. Again, very, very, very close-minded and judgmental. And it was a standard that I also put on myself, which made me be very closed and insecure also, because you have to remember that these standards that they're putting, you're looking at other people and you're judging them, but you're also judging yourself. So I also grew up very timid and quiet, and insecure about a lot of things, because when you're judging people and you're looking at them sideways all the time because they're not doing these things, there's a part of you that's like, okay, you're feeling it too, because you shouldn't even be doing it. But no, the short answer to that is no, I don't have a problem with that. I think it's wonderful. I think that women should lead more, and we should be outspoken and out front more, because we have a lot more experience, a lot more life experience, have a lot more compassion. So I'm excited. I'm happy to see women doing their thing now, especially in the church, especially.
Yeah, and we're seeing it more and more, but as people or boomers are transitioning to a more modern church that looks a lot different from their parents, our grandparents and great grandparents, is taking some adjustment to it. And it's something that you actively have to work on, because like you said, when you're judging people, it's a reflection on yourself. I tend to think it's because you really want to do that. Like you really want to be in the space that they're in, because something about it, the defiant ones, also says liberation. Also says that they're feeling free. And that's, I don't know, we aspire to be in that space of freedom and liberation, even in the Christian walk. And so what is so interesting to me is that when you have these doctrines and rules that, let's be honest here, women are affected a lot more than the men as far as the church rules go. So when you have these rules in place, how much it strips from a little girl in the making to become a woman. You talked about just your insecurities and being timid. Can you talk a little bit more about like how those insecurities showed up in your life? The timidity, the shyness. Did shame ever play a role in your life growing
Always. And I can tell 1,000 stories about when I was younger, but I can speak to now at 49 years old. There are things that I still feel very shy and insecure about, is certain things that I wear. And I told you just, recently I felt still a little bit uncomfortable about using curse words and saying things on social media, but it does make you feel like if you say a certain thing or dress a certain way or present your certain way, that you are not this virtuous woman that you were taught that you should strive to be. And the definition of virtuous has nothing to do with being virtuous, but everything to do with these made up standards that were implemented and ingrained in us by the church. And I don't think it was malicious by any means. I think our parents and the people in the church were doing their best and they were trying to live by those standards as well, some of them. But I also think it does a lot of harm to us as individuals. And I am really just learning how to speak out more. I would have never done an interview like this a few years ago. I would never post as much as I do. Even some of the clothes that I wear, I just would not have done it. It makes you feel like you need to be here. Children are not to be heard, they're to be seen. Women are supposed to let their husbands and the men lead. You just are always taught in this mode, in this space of constantly being oppressed. And if you are not in that mode, then you are defiant and you are rebellious. And I'm not a rebellious spirit. So my hat is always going off to women who bump up against that and say, no, you're not going to tell me what to wear, or what to do, or how to do it. My hat always goes off to those women because I was never one. But I am learning more to find my voice and to speak up. So I will share one story. There was a time years ago when this woman wanted me to sell Mary Kay products. And I did not want to sell these Mary Kay products, but I've been taught to be quiet and timid for so long that I could not speak up for myself. So I had my mom was living at the time, and she was visiting. And I said, Mom, I need you to tell this lady that I don't want to sell Mary Kay. Like, I had already bought the whole starter kit and everything. I did not want to do it, but I could not tell this woman no. And my mom was like, Tamika, just tell the lady you don't want to do it. And I could not do it. And my mom had to tell this lady that I did want to sell Mary Kay. And the woman felt awful because she's like, why didn't you just tell me? Why did you buy this whole thing? And that is one of many stories where I just felt like I did not have a voice. And if I did speak up, I felt like I would hurt somebody, hurt their feelings, or embarrass them. And I took all of that and I carried it on my shoulders. And that's a hard one to let go.
Yeah. And that's interesting because so you have church are there to do a certain part as far as the rearing of kids, the rearing of women, girls, young girls. And then you have home that's responsible solely for it. But I feel that because the church is so wrapped into the patriarchy, that the sermons they kind of cater to are very heroic sermons of men, because men see themselves as male characters of the Bible. Men see themselves as David. They see themselves as Paul, as Peter. They don't see themselves in Mary at all. They want you to see that, but they play on the notes of Mary calling herself lowly, a maid servant like me. But they don't grasp the whole Magnificat where she's just saying basically to you that everyone in the world is going to call me blessed. I am the highly favored one. They're not playing those notes that speak to femininity in the church. And so when you have something as brilliant as a Wednesday night purity service, I think the idea is brilliant. Those are missed moments where someone like a Tamika Christy coming, trying to find her voice, to learn about Hagar, who lifted her voice in the wilderness, and God heard her and gave her a promise in the midst of her wilderness. You don't learn about Jael's wife, who basically killed the man that men were hunting for because he had come against Israel. And so this woman lured him into her tent and was like, hey, take a nap. I'll fix you some warm milk. And while he was sleeping, she took a peg and put it in his temple. We don't hear about the heroism of women. And therefore, you're definitely not going to hear much about femininity in its brilliance. And so I'm interested to know who do you relate to in the Bible of the stories that you were told, either growing up or recently, just studying on your own? Who is it that you relate to?
I really like the story of Ruth and Naomi because I always felt like with my dad raising me, I always felt like I was looking for this strong woman of faith to kind of help guide me and lead me. So I really do relate to that a lot because even at this age, I'm still trying to learn and grow. And I never, ever try to profess to be, because I grew up in a church, that I am somebody who knows the Bible or knows all these things about the Bible. I was never interested. I went to church because I had to. True, I was there. And I had this conversation with one of my best friends, and she's like really into the Bible and the scriptures, and she's always talking about these Dead Sea Scrolls. And I said, I am not going to debate with you because I don't know my Bible like that. What I know is what I was taught to be, and that's what I'm trying to do and trying to grow in that area. So I always think of myself as this woman trying to find this woman who I have strived to be in my mind, not the woman that I was taught that I should be, but the woman that I strive to be, and to try to hold on to that so that person can kind of lead me and help me get to where I'm going. So I think that probably resonates most with me more than anything else. A lot of the women that I remember growing up, like the Rahabs and there were always these negative images of women. So,
like Jezebel.
Yeah.
Did y'all teach about Jezebel? Was the reason we couldn't wear makeup? Things like
and
that.
And women being referred to as Jezebels.
Yeah.
And I remember I said this on my post. I think you heard it. We would fellowship sometimes with other churches. We would fellowship with Baptist churches. And, Baptist church, people are very free. And I remember seeing women in their makeup, and I thought that they were so beautiful, and their makeup was beautiful. But I felt sad for them because I was like, they're going to go to hell. Like, they're pretty, but they're going to go to hell. And I know it's funny, but it was awful. It was awful.
It is. Because growing up Pentecostal, the Baptist people are safe.
No.
If you're Baptist, you smoke cigarettes. The Baptist people definitely
not.
Yeah, like they're not even going. So that's why I'm laughing, because it's like, oh wow, I go to a Baptist church now, and he curses a lot in the pulpit, the pastor. So I'm always like, but then I'm like, okay, calm down. It's not the end of the world. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, but it's how we're taught that we have this precedent, being Pentecostal or holiness or whatever, over everybody else, and that everybody else is lost and they don't know the way. And with a woman, it's like such visceral around a woman wearing makeup and looking beautiful and showing up in that light. I want to know a little bit, Tamika, if you don't mind, about your first lady, because you talked about like going to the fellowship with the Baptist church, which is huge as a Kojic person. Like, y'all fellowshipped at the Baptist church. Fellowshipping there and seeing the women look so beautiful in their makeup. What was it like watching your first lady?
My first lady, I really actually liked her a lot. Again, my dad was single. He was a single dad, and she really embraced me as a little girl. And I remember the first time she met me, she looked at me and she said, "You've been out in the sun too long." And I didn't know exactly what that meant. And I had fingernail polish on my nails, and it was chipping off. And she said, "Oh, we got to get that off of you, baby." And she was the sweetest woman. She took me in. She would cook for me. She was amazing. And one thing I remember about her is she would eat ice cream with her teeth. And I remember one day I said to her, "How do you do that? That doesn't hurt your teeth to eat ice cream like that?" And she pushed her dentures out like that. I said, oh. But I respected her a lot. I admired her. She was a woman of God. I was a kid growing up, so people have their own thoughts and their own feelings about people, but I respected her a lot. I respected the way she was with her husband, the way she raised her children. She didn't work. She kind of took care of everybody around her, and I really liked her for that. And that was one of the things that I admired. And even as I'm saying it, I'm just like, okay, you took care of everybody around you. But that's what I admired about her. And we had a good relationship. She was very approachable. She always showed up whenever women needed her. Women, because she wouldn't be there, for the men. That was the pastor's job. But she was very available and self-sacrificing. I loved her.
What do you think about sensuality and salvation or spirituality? Do you think a Christian can be sexy?
Absolutely. I think a Christian can be sexy, and I think Christians should be sexy if that's what they want to do. I think they should. Yes, absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with that anymore. I did before, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that anymore. I think that everybody has their own standards of what taste is, and I know that varies by people, and that too is their business. I've seen people giving dynamic messages with their cleavage out. I've seen people give dynamic messages in, pretty all covered up. I think the way you present yourself and express yourself is however you want to. And one of the things that I would tell my children is all we have to do on this earth is to love people and to treat people with kindness. Everything else is up to God. And thank God that we don't have that job of figuring out what people should wear and how they should wear it and what they should be doing. Thank God that we don't have to do that. All we have to do is love people. Like, how easy is that? It's like the easiest thing in the world.
Right. Right. But it's something about, and I mean, to be fair, it's not just in the church, right? We see this in government. We see this in corporate America. Women just have this fight, as to be themselves and to do it a certain way to not offend men. And I just believe the church, as I don't know if you know, so I'm in divinity school. I'm at Boston College in the theology program there, working on a master's in theology. So one of the things that I often say in my class is, you guys, the church is the most powerful entity in the world. To me, it is. I believe that it's a brilliant idea. I believe that it was just like the family. It was ordained by God. Peter, upon this rock, I'll build my church. We know that that's kind of how it started. And before that, it was just like these crusades and this platform Jesus kind of built on the mountaintops and just preaching to masses. And something is sad to me. Like, I don't know how we got so far off with a sermon on the mountain, where you're fellowshipping afterwards with fish and bread, to vilifying women's sensuality, vilifying women who do too much, whereas she's up before the men. As I've heard them say a lot, she shouldn't be up before the men. And it saddens me because you have a group of people watching, women. So for those that care, the women that care, they're going to diminish their light, right? They're going to diminish their femininity. They're going to cover up. They're going to do all that it takes to please this weak man, because that's where I believe the rules came from. A man that was weak and just didn't want to cheat on his wife or whatever it might have been. And so just like men do, they'll sleep with you and hate you, And so it's something became disgusting to him about it, just to appease his weakness. But he couldn't push the narrative. He had to get another woman to push the narrative, generational. I think that's just my belief about it. And someone asked in the chat, do they still have rules today? Yes, some churches do. I mean, a lot of them are going beyond it, but some churches still have those same rules today. But as we look at femininity and as we embrace the topic of what it means to be intentionally designed as a woman, we have to know that we have a space in the modern church, the church of old. We always had a space there. And perhaps, just perhaps, I know you've heard this growing up in church all your life, when we quench the Holy Spirit, maybe that's an act of diminishing women. When we quench women from being themselves, from showing up in their femininity wildly, even if their lips are polished perfectly red, ruby woo matte, glazed to perfection. Perhaps we quench the Holy Spirit every time we look at a woman and diminish her light. And I want to hear from you in regards to ways that you feel like at times you yourself diminished your light, or you saw women in the audience or women that you even knew just diminish their light. And what effect do you think that had on you, even as an adult today?
Well, I think if we were always taught as young people in the church to be appropriate, everything was about being appropriate, and it's either age appropriate or gender appropriate. And so, in every aspect of my life, I have been disciplined in the way I speak, the way I dress, the way I am around people. And it's always been that way. Even at work, in work settings, I can't tell you the number of times when I was working, I'd be in a meeting and some man would come behind me and say, I think what she needs to say is XYZ, or I just want to piggyback off of what Tamika said. And there's so many times in my mind where I'm thinking, you didn't add anything to this conversation. I don't need you to piggyback off of anything because I explained myself perfectly well. But I didn't, because it is when you are a woman and you are a Black woman in almost any environment, including, unfortunately, environments around other Black women, you find yourself being torn down in so many different ways because you shine. And for somebody like me who has already been muted through teaching and Christianity and is already naturally an introvert, you don't want any more criticism. You don't want any more shine on you. So you do kind of keep yourself at a certain level because you just don't want the smoke. And so it shows up in everything. It shows up in my everyday life as a writer, as a mom, as a lawyer. I don't like a lot of shine, and people around me, they say, why don't you tell people this? Or why don't you tell people that? And my motto for myself is learning how to get over myself. Like, I need to get over myself because people are going to do, be, say whatever they want to, but I have to find a way to let my light shine and let me be in my own way without hearing all this ancillary noise. And I see the same thing for other women in the way they show up, in the way they dress, in the way they speak. And people approach me or reach out to me. Well, what do you think about this? I was going to post this. Or I was going to say this. Or what do you think about that? And I think for all of us women, it's a natural thing to think like, okay, what is somebody going to say? And unfortunately, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, unfortunately, the biggest criticizer of women is other women. And it's just this mentality of, it's sort of like the whole African American race. It's just like there's something about women where we dress for other women. We do everything for other women. And we are the quickest to tear somebody, like tear one of us down. And it's really sad, but I see it a lot, not only in myself, but in other people. And I know that comes from society as a whole in our culture, but also from the way we were raised and in church, in this idea of being appropriate and being ladylike. That was the thing, being ladylike.
Yeah. What were some of those attributes to ladylikeness? Did they ever say, like, this is what a lady does and a lady doesn't do?
Well, we don't curse. We don't talk very loud. We're not there to be seen and to make a spectacle. The dresses should not be too long. So when you cross your legs, if your skirt comes up, past your knee, then that is too short. Cleavage, too much makeup. Makeup should be tasteful. Anything too loud and boisterous is not ladylike.
And see, I go back and forth with those things. Like, I get what they're saying, that's not ladylike, but I'm telling you, when you're in a wilderness and your dream is dying in the desert sun and there's no water of relief, you will raise your voice.
And
you're
what
gonna
about ladylike refer to kindness and having a good heart and being a confidence keeper and a truth teller and opening your arms and your space to people when they need you. How about that for being ladylike? You know, none of those things were taught. It was all these external things, these small things that meant absolutely nothing and have nothing to do with your character as a woman or as a person. So none of that was taught. You know, virtuous in purity class, you know, they didn't teach us about being kind and wrapping your arms around people and being here and being a good friend and being a good family member.
Right, and giving out compliments, because like you said, women are tough on other women, which is why I said earlier, like, I feel like a man is behind the rules, but they definitely pushed a woman to do it, because that's what we do. We go in and we critique, and it's something beautiful about when another woman compliments us anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's like,
because you feel like,
thank you, girl.
okay,
you know, it's something.
Thank you.
And you see me even way more than a man. I mean, what? Boys like whatever. But but when another woman does it and compliments her sister or whatever you want to call her, it's just something appreciative about it. But we're not getting those nuggets because we don't see the sermon is not going to be on the friendship of Elizabeth and Mary that share pregnancy reports with one another. It's going to be on the lowliness of it, of who Mary is. It's not going to be on Rahab's brilliance. It's going to be on her lifestyle choices. And that's debatable too, to unpack that. It's not going to even be on the Song of Solomon, that woman who is, to me, universal woman, because with emotions, she kind of talks on them all. And I just feel like we miss moments like that when we're so selective of the things we don't touch and the way we approach masculinity as supreme in sermons. And like, if you're going to lead, go ahead and lead. I mean, I think God said something about it in the garden when they ate the fruit. But if he's going to lead, lead. But also don't disregard that we're still the helpmeet. We're still there with purpose. We are nourishers. We're protectors. We're available to receive. And those are our gifts in femininity. And again, when you diminish that, you're quenching that's at work within us. And so it's a journey. That's all I can say.
It is. It's a long journey.
Of unlearning.
It's a long journey of unlearning.
Yeah.
And even now, I'm sure you are, especially being in divinity school, you learn something every day. And through people and conversations, and even through social media, there are a lot that you can figure out and you learn from other people. And that, like the way we connected on that post about church, you figure things out as you go, a little bit at a time. And it's always some like, oh, aha, kind of moment. But I think as long as we keep seeking those opportunities to grow and to be open and to do a little bit better, then I think we will all get there over time. I just think it's some of the closed-mindedness that they're still preaching and teaching in some of these institutions.
Right. And let women be women. Let women do what women do without having to define it as anything. Let them show up in their grandeur. It's okay. It doesn't have to be threatening. But when you teach that from a male standpoint, it trickles into women where we hate on one another. And then you have girls saying, I'm not a girl's girl. I only have guy friends because I can't get along with girls. And I mean, I've said things like that so many times myself when, you're just going through a season where everybody's mean and it just seems like the boys aren't. But all of that comes into play because it's the teachings, the rules are so deep rooted it plays a part like shame. So here's the interesting thing about shame. Shame never has to show up in Tamika Christy's life and say, hey, Tamika, I'm shamed. But what it does show up as is emotions, bad attitude, maybe, insecurities. It sends attributes of itself. And so when you're then deciding, like, I'm going to work on my attitude this week, shame don't care. Go on and work on your attitude because you're putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound anyway. The deep-rooted issue is the shame that is sending up all these effects. And that's what these rules are doing as well. Like you say, women can't wear skirts, women can't wear makeup, whatever, sit down, don't talk, you can't be on your period, whatever they come up with. But it's creating a lifestyle and an emotion that was never, ever intended to be attached to women in the first place. And so we're walking around all confused. We're making it up as we go. And unfortunately, I wish it was this easy. Unfortunately, it isn't as simple as a trip to Sephora in the Fenty section and put it on and you got it. That's another cover up. It's a deep dive within to go back to what I like to call the feminine face of God. So, God is in the garden. Sorry. God is creating the universe, the world that we know today. And God said something very interesting in a conversation series where let's make man in our image. So now we know that somebody else is accompanying God. And then the next verse is, or the next line is, we'll make male and female in our likeness, in our image. The missed opportunity is that no one connects the dot of God's femininity to women like they connect the dots to God's masculinity to everybody. So we all walk around like masculine in some form, whether someone mentioned Claire Huxtable last week. To me, she taps into that masculinity a lot. She does both, the character, not Felicia Rashad, but the character taps into masculinity a lot. So the feminine face of God, what do you think of that aspect? I don't know if you've ever thought about it. It may be a lot today that I've said, but what do you think about the feminine face of God and how God was so intentional when he created females that he reached into his own bosom and mirrored you after she, which others call
well, this is that's a lot for me to unpack in this last second. But I do agree with you that there was a big part of creation in who we are and in the Bible where God made it clear that women had a big role, a part of life and a part of man, and not just as a helper. I feel like there is not one without the other. I don't see it as when he created and he took this rib and you became this other part. You know, they like to use this phrase like woman, but I just think that they have to exist together. And I think he was very intentional about that. And I think like a few other things, I'm not going to go too deep, but I think that the Bible can be used as a tool to separate people and things, whether it's race or whether it's gender. And I don't think it was an oversight, and I don't think it was unintentional. And I like that you looked into that and you can see for yourself this our image and we, meaning that there is something else there. So I can appreciate that. I wish more people would value and respect that and even look into it. But even if they didn't, how about just the simple respect of women? And uplifting and empowering and being supportive if you never thought about the concept of how we were created and why. But how about that? How about just a little bit of respect and grace for each other and for women? We could start there at the grassroots. So I might go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with you because that's your thing. I'm so glad that you've been doing the work because if you hadn't been doing the work, I'm afraid that you wouldn't have put that TikTok up. That wouldn't have led to this. And I know that this is how we chip away at the wall. This is us marching around the wall, Jericho walls, for it to tumble down, because every time we raise our voice and our awareness as to what it was like and what was taught, it breaks down the walls a little bit more for the next woman. The next woman will start to think about, well, what is the feminine face of God? What is the feminine attributes? Because that's how it was for me as well. I started reading things totally different in the Bible, and you're correct. The Bible that we have in our hand today is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. It just is. And when King James ordered the Bible to be translated in English, I mean, we don't know how much of agendas were personal agendas and personal feelings was interpreted into the pages. That doesn't mean to throw away the Bible. That doesn't mean that the Bible is not the most valuable book in the world. But it does leave room to think about, what is God saying in this? What do I need to take away from this? What is it that God wants me to know? Because if we're tapping into the Holy Spirit, which I think is part of the femininity of God, and we're tapping into the Holy Spirit, then the Holy Spirit's job is to lead us to that truth. And so certain things just don't apply to your life today. It just doesn't. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't be in the Bible. It doesn't mean that it's terrible. It just means that geographically, or the signs of the times at that time, this was what was happening. Like, my grandmother's church believed you couldn't wear pants because of a verse in Deuteronomy. Well, when you uncover that or pull back those layers, or what we call exegete, when you do that, you realize, like, oh, they were in some type of situation where they needed to make some type of distinction for that moment, not for our lifestyle or to just cast people out because of it. So you're right. The Bible is something that really have to pull those nuggets that apply to
you do, but it
life.
also makes me wonder a lot about human nature, is why we take something like the Bible and use it to oppress people in different ways. Why are we taking what we wear and what we drink and what we eat and all these other things and applying them to our lives instead of taking out the good parts of it? It is, yes, the literal translation over and over and over again, and that's fine. We're not here to debate who wrote what's supposed to be, but if we're going to use it, if we're going to have this thing as a part of our society and a part of our culture, why aren't we pulling out the love? Why isn't that the primary thing that we're talking about, and feeding people and helping people and loving our neighbor? Why are we talking about what we're putting on our backs? Like, it says a lot to me about human nature that we take this thing that is supposed to guide us in our own spiritual journeys to become a better person and a better neighbor or sister or wife or whatever, and we're spending all this time talking about these small things that have nothing to do with making life better for ourselves or the next generation. It's just so incredible to me that we have spent so much time growing up talking about that. It just really baffles me. And people have taken this and they've lived it for so long that they cannot get out of it. So it's impossible to encourage another woman, or it's impossible to be kind to a person who looks a certain way or dresses a certain way or is a certain sexuality, because your whole life you have been programmed that these are the things that you are supposed to be Christian, rather than this is what love it looks like, and this is what it looks like to love other people and to care about other people, and forget about all this other stuff. It's so baffling. And when my best friend always says, when she lost religion, she found God. And I feel like that is one of the most powerful statements that I've ever heard in my life. And even now, as I start continuing to unpack, there's some things that I'm just like, this is incredible. And I'm listening to you now, and I'm just like, we're still talking about pants. Why? But we are. It's just like, it's crazy to me. And with the way the world is going, and currency and suicide and mental health and all these things, and we're talking about people drinking wine and cursing and women dressing like men, and like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because the bigger story to all of that, we don't see the connection. The whole creation is connected. But for some reason, just like we were saying earlier, well, I was saying that the Baptist church people in our head, we were taught that they weren't that saved. You know, we don't see the connect, like that's our brothers and sisters over there. We don't see it. We have ourselves just sectioned off. And that's the way that it has gone for many, many years. But things like this, conversations like this, helps chip away. Before we go, I want to hear about your book. I want people to know that you are an author. She does have a book out there. Tell us all
I
about
actually
your
have
book.
2 books. My third book is in production. It will be released in January of 2024. I'm a fiction writer, and I write books that are pretty much based on what we talked about today. They're fiction, but very real life that have to do with family and overcoming perfectly imperfect people who are dealing with marriage, mental health issues, family issues, all types of relationship issues, from familial to relationships to friendships. And what I do is I take these relatable people that are like you and like me, and I put them into real life situations, and I help them go through. And my message to my readers is that life is hard, but we can always get through with help, with therapy. Every single person in my book is always in therapy. And I like to say that if I'm not a therapist, but I play one in my books. So my books they're all fiction, but they're all about family dynamics and trauma. So my books are anytime soon. And the sequel is Never Too Soon, and they're already out. They've been out for several years, and the next book is coming out in January of 2024. So thank you for that plug.
Absolutely. And where can
Anywhere,
they find the book?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target. You can Google. You can find them on my website. There's a link on my IG page. You can get them anywhere.
Okay, I have a little bit of fire run, then we're gonna let you go enjoy your beautiful Sunday. What song do you have on repeat right now?
What song? I haven't really been listening to music. I'm sorry. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. But if I have a song that I listen to all the time, it's Love's Train by Confunction. I love that.
Okay. What's your favorite?
I like the smell of coffee beans.
Oh, I cannot drink coffee, but I do love the smell of it. Are you, well, we talked about that. Let's see. Your dream vacations.
I would love to go to Ghana. I think I'm going to go for my 50th birthday.
You should. And tell us all about it on TikTok, because we want to go there with you. Are you a red lipstick girl or a nude lipstick girl? Definitely nude. Well, Tamika, this has been awesome. I want you to stay in my life. Don't go anywhere, because I'm sure we're going to have more and more conversations like this. This has been beautiful. And like I said, these type of installments chip away at the wall that has separated, divided, and moved us away from, as you eloquently stated, grace and love and kindness. And that's what it's all about in this spiritual walk, is to extend those attributes of what God is, opposed to our rules in society. So thank you so much. How can people follow you to keep in touch with you?
I'm on Instagram at Our Rights Matter. I'm on TikTok. I'm Writer Lady 1 on TikTok. I try to keep my TikTok separate. And on Facebook, I'm Tamika Christy. So, but I do want to also thank you for this opportunity. You are absolutely beautiful and delightful, and I love your energy. So thank you so much for bringing you here and be here. And thank you for talking. I learned so much from you just by being in this conversation. And good luck to you in Divinity School. I know that's a lot. Yeah. So this was a good conversation.
Yes, it is. Thank you. And when I come out to San Francisco, we've got to have dinner. Did you say San Francisco?
Oakland, but it's the Bay Area. I can come to San Francisco. Yeah, don't unless you have a reason for going to San Francisco, come to this side of the Bay.
Okay, I'll come to the Bay and we can have dinner and keep on talking about this. Thank you so much. You guys, thank you for joining in. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your comments up here. They're great. We've unpacked a lot. Next week, we won't be meeting because it's Easter when he rose from the grave, and we're going to celebrate that. And then we'll resume for our third installment. We have a brilliant attorney as well in the making. She graduates, I believe, this May. And she actually grew up in church, as her dad and mom were the pastor and first lady. So we're going to hear all about her experience.
I'm going to tune in so I can listen to that one. But let me just say, by my own teaching, I've been having this glass of wine, and I wanted to drink it the whole time, but I thought it was so inappropriate.
Girl, drink your wine.
It's good.
You know, leave it to you. Take a sip of your wine. Y'all hype her up. Drink your wine. Sip your
I'm going to
wine.
wait till we off.
I am so mad at that. That is so sweet. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Tamika. Let's stay in touch. Thank you guys for being a part of this, and we'll see you on the 16th of April.
Bye.